Behavta is a Jewish humanitarian organization dedicated to promoting positive change among those in Toronto who have been marginalized by poverty and homelessness. The organization focuses on immediate intervention and referral, as well as empowerment through creative expressions and skills training. The organization's goal is to operate within a specific narrow focus within the umbrella of homelessness alleviation, and as such, they don't operate in the advocacy, policy, or housing spheres. Our team, Behavta Social Enterprise, originally was set up to perform a feasibility study to help Behavtas transform one of their client programs into a social enterprise. However, this initial goal quickly pivoted during our first meeting with the organization's executives. Instead, the organization would like us to measure the social cost of homelessness and how Behavta's skills training workshops address these challenges. While the pivot was a significant change, they highlighted that they want to understand their financial impact on addressing homelessness to refine the organization's story to donors, clients, and community members. As such, our team set out 3 goals to guide this research project. 1. To evaluate the impacts of Behavta's Work and Life Skills program on their participants. 2. Learn how Behavta's programs could alleviate social costs of homelessness. And thirdly, propose effective research methodologies for future researchers to conduct similar investigations.
So to design our survey questions, we had to conduct a literature review of how work and life skills training programs for homeless individuals like Behavtas can create more stable life outcomes and therefore reduce social costs. So in terms of Behavta's outcomes, they don't really have specific goals they want each client to meet, for example, attain housing or gain employment, because they recognize that people define success differently. So we explored a whole range of possible outcomes. And as well, we examined the major cost areas associated with homelessness via a report that was done on the cost of homelessness in Toronto that was compiled by a master's student who had volunteered for Behavta to do this research. So the factors we ended up looking at included housing stabilization, finding employment and or finding meaningful volunteering opportunities, pursuing further educational opportunities, physical health improvements, development of soft skills such as self-esteem and interpersonal skills, as well as the use of wraparound services via referrals by the caseworker that is assigned to each client for Behavta's programs. So on this slide, you see all the survey questions that went onto our final survey that was all approved by Behavta and sent out to its alumni. So we made 100% of the answers voluntary because we wanted to respect people's privacy and also their comfort levels in answering specific questions, because we knew that some questions could be very personal. That being said, we asked for things such as demographic information. We also asked them for their housing situation before and after completing the program, their education level before and after completing the program, as well as their employment and volunteering status before and after the program. And for all of these, we asked whether Behavta was a potential source of referral for the education or the employment opportunity to try to understand if there was a direct correlation there. Furthermore, we asked for primary sources of income support before and after the program, and we asked participants to rate themselves on a 5-point scale from less healthy to much healthier on the point of health, and on the point of self-esteem, we also asked them to rank themselves in a 5-point scale from decreased to increased in order to understand that correlation. So all of the options that we had for each of the questions were informed by our literature review.
And so for the following section, we'll be talking about the actual process of collecting the results and a broad overview of our findings. So we collected data, responses, and reached out to Marion to contact the Behavta Alumni Network. So she estimates that for the VSA program, 50 to 60 participants are still engaged on a yearly basis. And for the BFW program, that is higher since the first cohort was in 2018, and she estimates that 50 out of 55 are still engaged. Given that we had an overwhelmingly female response in our survey, we assumed that most of the respondents were referring to the BFW program they participated in, although we can't know for sure because we didn't ask that question specifically. We waited for approximately 2 weeks to let all the responses flow in, and that led us with 25 responses, which on a broad basis mention the following. So over 80% found themselves to be in better health after completing the program. 90% found themselves to be very supported from the caseworkers, which is very positive. The number of respondents living in rental housing increased from 26 to 50% post-program, and there's also a slight decrease in those living in emergency shelters. The number of reported unemployment decreased by 40% after graduation, and 86% of the respondents indicated Wehrhafte programs had a positive impact on self-esteem, which according to our research has positive spillover effects into other aspects of their lives.
So for this section, I'll be discussing about the key challenges that we as a team face while working together, as well as working with a team with partners at Wehrhafte. The first one is communication. So we learn to always be aware and mindful of the terminologies that we use when describing certain concepts in our reports, in our emails, even in our conversations, to make sure that they're accurately used to describe such a situation just as homelessness, poverty, or even like emergency shelters. That's some of the examples, as well as to always ask for clarification questions to make sure that everyone's on the same page and agreed and reach an agreement on the next step forwards and be open to feedback. The second part is regarding the partnering with Wehrhafte, and we learn to be patient and adaptable to meet the organization's needs and be, the most helpful to them. So the partners may not always know what they want in terms of the direction of their research output, and so for us, it's like our responsibility to take the ownership of the project and do your research and set clear expectations to the partners at Wehrhafte about what is the realistic goal for our partnerships throughout the semester. And then lastly is this insinuating circumstance of COVID really put a toll on everyone in terms of the organizations as well as research itself, with the closure of public space, and a lot of the clients at Wehrhafte have no access to internet, and so they weren't able to respond to surveys, and we also couldn't organize the focus groups to conduct our qualitative research. And so on our end, it's our responsibility to be adaptable and flexible and try to offer as much help as possible, and as well as we hope that we could use this research outputs as a guideline for future researchers in measuring the social benefits for Wehrhafte.
So for the next section, I'll be talking about the limitations of our research. So this includes both what we think the questions deserved if we had more, time and skills, etc., but also what we wish we would have done. So first of all, surveying, we would have asked more questions. From our research, we, for example, noticed that a lot of the costs associated to homelessness were related to police and those administrative services. So we wanted to ask a question about that, but it was a very sensitive topic, so we chose to omit it from the survey. And we also would have asked the question of which program are you referring to for maybe potential cross comparison. We also would have increased the representativeness of the sample. So as mentioned, it was very female, and with 25 responses, that's not really representative of the whole. And we would have liked to maybe have incentives with a gift card, or just making it available for more time. That might have been a good idea as well. We also would have liked to add qualitative data to supplement the quantitative data and the research we did, because obviously this is a very case-by-case basis, and there might be factors both within how the programs are designed or just other circumstances that make the program stronger or weaker, and we would have liked to gauge that through focus groups, but obviously because of COVID, our focus group was cancelled. Next step is we would have liked to include more policy recommendations, and this is difficult to do because, and this leads to the next point, it's difficult for us to isolate Wehrhafte from other variables. So to what extent was it this program in particular? What's the correlation coefficient with that, and to what extent is it other life circumstances that lead to better employment or better housing? Is it just a coincidence that after 6 months within this program, or however long time, there's an improvement, or is it actually linked to the network and the skills gained? In general, we would have liked to find more quantitative data on the cost of homelessness as well. Most of our research was relying on a report done by a master's student on the cost of homelessness for Wehrhafte. We struggled to find raw data from the city of Toronto, for example, on the cost of homelessness, and I think that would have been very beneficial to our research overall. In general, we would also like to come up with a criteria for impact, so looking beyond the cost of homelessness, but also how effective are these programs in creating an impact, and what does that criteria look like. So this is both something that we think would have been interesting to provide for Wehrhafte, given like the background research we did, but also something that we believe would be beneficial for the broader question overall, just assessing the impact beyond just cost. And finally, for more extensive research, it would have been cool to do a time series analysis, or cross-sectional at least, having a control group to see, again, trying to isolate whether it's Wehrhafte or not. That's creating this positive change. And also maybe having comparisons with similar programs from other NGOs, both within Toronto or the GTA, where it's easier to compare what's working and what isn't. And also, of course, a statistical analysis would have probably been more helpful in us actually being able to provide that number for how much Wehrhafte reduces the cost of homelessness in Toronto.
So on this sections, I'll be discussing about the overall communications and partnership experience while working with Wehrhafte for our team, and the learning key takeaways that we've gathered from this experience. So firstly, the challenge of there was a major switch in the project's direction that was not communicated to the team before our first touch point, and even though that that had a significant shift of our expectations, we were able to adapt quickly to try to be helpful to the organizations. And overall, then the organization was very supportive of the direction that we took with this research project, and we credit to that to the professional and open communications that both sides have, and working with the staff at the app, that was a very general positive experience. And overall, the three key takeaways here is that, first of all, humanitarian organizations have very different approaches to solving a broad umbrella social issue, which in this case is homelessness and poverty. And so the organization's objective also influence how they communicate their values and how they define success to internal and external stakeholders, such as donors, even their staff and community members. Secondly, we learned to be flexible with the direction of the research to ensure that the output provides values to the organization. And thirdly, we learned that to not be hesitate to ask for clarification questions, since we learned that our understanding may not be what the organization's intended. And so it is a steep learning curve for us to understand the objective. And we always ask for feedback from the organization in every step, to ensure that both sides are always on the same page. And we are very grateful for the director of the program, was mainly on Son at Wehrhafte, who was very responsive to inquiries and tried her best to provide thorough responses and help.
So we all submitted individual reflections, but we did have some collective takeaways as a team that we wanted to share that could very well be suggestions for next year's service learning students as well. And the first is just that you should be prepared to be flexible in your outputs and also know your own limitations. When we were given our first research question, we really wanted to do that coronational analysis that told us, Wehrhafte's program specifically saves this amount of dollars. But we quickly realized that was out of our scope, both as researchers in terms of our skills, but also in terms of the time frame and the level of engagement with the organization we had. And this kind of brings me to our next point, which is that you don't have to be perfect, but you just need to be helpful. So in adapting our research question and making this new report, we were actually able to still be helpful, I think, by providing them some insights into what their participants think about the program and kind of the outcomes that they don't track themselves. Furthermore, I think having clear expectations about how much you'll be engaged with the NGO early on is really good. I think a lot of us wanted to be engaged more with the NGO and wanted to, be more present in the organization. But of course, respecting the NGO's own time and also their own boundaries in terms of how much information they can give us or how much of their time they can give us, we really realized that we needed to prioritize doing what we could for them while not pushing them to give too much for us, and that relationship building is really important. And lastly, I think we really found that this was an opportunity to understand the gap between academia and application, because at first we were all a bit uncomfortable with the prospect of looking at homelessness via social cost. But we realized that, each NGO has different purposes. And as academics, we might see ourselves more aligned with activism, and some NGOs are more focused on activism as well. But Vehafta specifically focuses on service delivery and getting goods to people that need it now. And so by the end of the project, I think we really developed a sense of appreciation for the work that they do and the fact that they need these kind of figures, they need this kind of research in order to appeal to their donors, in order to appeal to the grants that they apply to deliver those on-the-ground services. So understanding the different types of NGOs and really respecting everyone's role in this ecosystem and kind of bridging the academia and practice gap, I think that was a really big takeaway for all of us.
In this final sections, I'll be discussing about the implication of research project to the broader issue of homelessness in Toronto and the disproportionate impacts of COVID on this research as well as the organization. By providing beneficial outcomes to its participants, then we've learned that Vehafta's work and life skills training programs have the potential to decrease the social cost of alleviating homelessness, and in addition to providing unquantifiable human impacts such as on self-esteem as well as physical health to the program participants. And currently, the social cost of homelessness also manifests itself directly and indirectly through funding of shelters, direct solutions, as well as additional costs to municipalities and taxpayers through institutions such as healthcare and police services. Due to the circumstances of COVID-19, then the issue of homelessness has created a lot of unexpected barriers to Vehafta's operations. Most volunteer programs, for example, were shut down to support the social distancing, and the organization was able to quickly adapt by developing virtual solutions to continue achieving their humanitarian causes, such as including creating thank you video for frontline workers, social media message promotions, as well as crowdsourcing for donations for their van operations, food deliveries, as well as gathering mass donations.